We get to focus on acquiring the best customers, the customers that we all want. And the question is, where do they live and how do we find them? Happy Wednesday, Sales Ascenders. We are back for another member spotlight. This is one you absolutely do not want to miss because we get to focus on acquiring the best customers, the customers that we all want. And the question is, where do they live and how do we find them? We are going to dive into that with today's member spotlight, which is Luis Diaz. And he is pro. He is pro at the strategies that he's using, and it's all built around podcasts. Now, there might be some of you, if you're like me, that are completely, absolutely terrified of podcasts, or some of you that might even have started doing podcasts. There might be some of you that love podcasts. This is going to be the episode for you because we're going to look at podcasts in a way to generate new customers and profit and do it in a completely pro way. And the reason I know this is because he works with some of the top huge pro earners and names that all of us will probably know. And we're going to get to dive into some of those stories. So with that said, let's all welcome Luis to the member spotlight. Welcome, man. Thanks for coming out today.
Chris, dude, thanks for having me on, man. So I love the group, obviously, and I've been enjoying you guys' content. So pumped to be here.
Hey, yeah, thanks, man, for carving out some time. I know others in this audience will benefit from the things that you've been working on, man. Big all around the podcast space, really powerful space. I am a notorious, really slow reader.
Me too.
It's like plaguing me through. So I have completely gone when I discovered audiobooks.
Yeah.
And this is, I read an article, 2014, it's like Harvard Business something. He's like, the average CEO reads a book a month. That day, I read never. And then that day, since that day, 6 years ago, I've read at least a book a month.
Wow.
'Cause I was like, done. That's enough correlation for me to invest my time. And I was like, I can't do this reading thing. So I went the audiobook route, podcast route. So I'm excited to talk about this space, man. How did you get into podcasting?
Dude, so I was, so funny enough, I was in health and fitness first, and I sucked it right up at video. And I needed a way to get online because I was working in a gym at the time, just coming out of college. I was working in a gym like 12, 14-hour days. And my ceiling was capped. Like I had the max amount of clients. I could not go any higher. And the only way you could make more money in those days was like to go online, and still is really, to go online and build a scalable brand or a scalable product, right? So I hired a coach actually to work with me and help me, and he was one of my first podcasting clients, funny enough. So started podcasting for the fitness space for to build my online health brand, because that was one of like the recommendations or some of the advice I got from one of my mentors. And I literally bought like a $12 course, taught myself how to do it, and then took off and took like an idea I had and just rolled with it. And awesome. That podcast like failed miserably in like 8 weeks. and the funny thing was, like, I remember like just hating it at the first one. I'm like, this is so time consuming. It takes like 8 hours to do one episode. It's a pain in the butt. And I only enjoy the one part of like content creation, like the part that everybody likes to enjoy. And I quit, failed. I scratched that idea, and I came back with another idea that was super like targeted to the customer's pain points, and really just focus on the listener, which I think is not a big mistake people make. They try to make it this whole big fancy thing. It's like, no, just hit your client's pain points, and they will respond, and they will reach out to you. So I rebranded, and a couple months later came back with a podcast called Ask the Ab Guy, which is kind of like a spin on like Gary V's Ask Gary V, but it was for like guys who wanted to get 6-pack abs. And cool. That show really, really took off and like helped me kind of find my feet in podcasting. Got up to like 19,000 downloads a month. I was getting clients from it. I was selling affiliate products, so I was making some money then. And I started to help other people do it at that time. That was like 2017. So I helped a guy named Ben Bukowski do it for free. So he had a podcast at the time he wasn't doing anything with, and I was like, hey, like, let me do it for you. I was just trying to find a way to get some credibility and get my name out there. So I worked for free for like 9 months, and we took a show.
9 months.
Yeah, everyone thought I was batshit crazy. Uh, like I was still living at home at the time. My parents like, why are you doing this? You're like, what are you doing? So I worked for him for like 9 months and for free, and eventually took a show from like 33,000 downloads to 110,000 downloads.
Wow.
Granted, he was a very credible guy. Like he was putting out great content too. So that really just helped me kind of put my name on the map, man. And 2017 pivoted to like just working with people on podcasting. And from there, I started to just get a ton of clients from just hustling, obviously hustling on Facebook, kind of like, a lot of DMs and a lot of cold outreach, honestly, in those early days. But that really worked, and that helped me just kind of grow the agency more to what it is today. So
I'd love to hang out in that space, in that comment that you just mentioned, because I know enough people in our group, our audience right now.
Yeah.
There's a good portion of them that have podcasts. There's a good portion of them that don't have podcasts. I know all of us are interested in either beginning or optimizing how we build connection and relationship with prospects and customers.
Yeah.
So I have a few questions for you around this. One is this relationship between content creation and putting that out there, and then that outreach piece that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Were there campaigns built around recent, like, did you just do it when you released an episode? Can we go more granular there?
Yeah, totally. So to separate it out nicely, the outbound stuff I was doing was mainly on Instagram, and I wasn't really targeting them with content per se. I was just literally showing my results, like, hey, I worked with X, Y, and Z. Have you ever considered launching a podcast? And I just leave that open question to them, and I probably do like 50 to 100 DMs a day. I would do in this one. It was literally like 1 or 2 months where I was just starting this agency and I was going in. So that was one end of it, and it had nothing to do with content I had created. To your point about how to use content to kind of go out there to the marketplace and like create that.
Yeah.
When it comes to being strategic around that stuff, what I've seen really work is say you're targeting like dental owners who are trying to get started in Facebook ads. You would have a VA or somebody who would like literally make that really awesome piece of content. You'd add them as a friend, and then you'd have your VA send that to them as you, right? Like, hey, saw you're a dentist, just created an episode. This is like literally helped our clients make millions. Just check it out. It's completely free, and leave it there and let them go and do their own research.
Yeah.
So that's one targeted approach. You can kind of put the podcast and your outreach on together to make a really good, make a really strong push. That is also not like, it's not like super salesy. It's you're kind of leaving the door open for them. But yeah. What other questions do you have around that? 'Cause that's a great topic.
Yeah, it is. So like I heard outreach, 50 to 100. You're doing that on, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, all of it, email. Yeah. How'd you manage that piece?
So it was mainly Facebook and Instagram.
Okay.
Because for me, that was where I hung out most, and I knew like you could easily sift through who was my ideal customer. For back then, that was probably anyone making high six figures to $1 million in the health and fitness space, because that's where I started first. And yeah, like I just literally went through my DMs. I had no VA at the time or any kind of help back then. So literally just sifting through, related pages, related profiles, and just shooting them a quick DM.
Cool. Putting the time in.
What was that? Yeah, just putting time in. Yeah.
I love it, man. And so this obviously continued to grow. And what the next piece I want to get to for everyone listening is some of the big success stories that you've had. Because I know we can all learn from some of those. And you've got to work with some just on really big podcasts and campaigns. And the behind the curtain behind you as a metaphor of seeing like what they're actually doing, how the systems are running, and the team, all the things that I'm assuming all of us are curious about to make the result happen. So that said, let's go to like that big, like one of your biggest successes, breakthroughs within podcasts.
So in 2017, I randomly at a Ryan Levesque conference, I met the former manager of Taylor Swift, and his name's Rick Barker, and Rick's still a good friend of mine to this day. And Rick had became a client at this event I went to, but The cool thing about Rick is that he had no idea how to podcast. He just had great results.
Yeah.
So one of the great things, I have a video somewhere on my page about this, but nowadays we want to talk results. Rick is now getting 100 emails per month from his podcast. And he's selling a $2,000 coaching program. That's for basically it's for musicians who want to learn how to market their music business, but he's making about 100 grand from his podcast per year. And that's on the side of that's one of his businesses. He's a manager for like big labels as well.
Yeah.
So with Rick, one of the things we found that really worked is like his audience is really, really hungry for the tactical stuff. So we kept the episodes I'd say under 20 minutes for sure. 15 minutes. I feel like if I remember rightly, that's like, he didn't go anything over 15 minutes. So if you're looking to hit like an audience that is more in the biz ops space, sales space, we found what really works is that keeping your episodes super short, tactical, and then the call to action, which for what I call is a green light offer. You want to make sure you have a really strong green light offer. And what that is essentially is something that it's basically the premise is like, if your perfect client was driving down the road, they would have to pull over to get that thing that you just offered them. And that's something I heard from Dan Kennedy, and like, it really stuck with me. I'm like, so how do you create that for the podcast? So for us, what we found worked with Rick is that he was giving away this time it was his free book, which was basically showing musicians how to create their music business and how to market themselves and sell themselves for higher prices to get gigs and whatnot. For anyone in the space, like, that doesn't have to be a free product. That can be a paid product. The goal of it is it's got to speak directly to your ideal client. It's got to have some kind of scarcity in it, whether that's time bound or limit, or like there's only a limited number of things.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that it's got to be relevant to your customer situation, right? So if you can hit all those three main points, you can really do a good job and really start to pull people off the podcast magnetically without having to do a lot of extra content creation.
Copy's key. Copy's key.
What's that?
Oh, I think there's a little delay. Yeah, copy is really important in terms of just messaging and how communicating. Always, it seems to come back to that. Yeah, and those are obviously some great results. Taylor Swift is obviously a name everyone knows. Just about. I mean, I know her name, and I haven't. So everyone's probably gonna hate on me. I haven't really listened to her music a ton, but yet still know her. So this is a piece that I think that I'm personally like really, really curious about. Yeah. And the little I do know I've been blown away with is, let's talk about why podcast listeners are some of the best customers in terms of like average household income, in terms of the type of connection and relationship that's being built through the medium of podcasts compared to ads, compared to other social platforms. So I'd like you to kind of speak in that space a little bit. Sure.
So, a great way to put it, a great analogy I'll use here, and I hope it lands. It may not, but if you've ever tried to walk up to a girl in a bar, it's a lot harder to walk up to a girl at a bar and converse with her and like get her number or ask her to dance or something like that, than it is if you were to try and walk up to a girl who is walking down the street. And the reason for that is because when she's walking down the street, she's not really in the mode of like, I'm gonna get hit on, or like there's these creepy dudes around me and I want to keep my guard up. Just like our customers are, when they're on Facebook and they see an ad, they have their guard up. When they are on, because they know their ads there, like no one's stupid. Right. Like our customers are are much more sophisticated, especially if you're in like the B2B space.
Yeah.
So just like you're reaching out or going to like talk to a girl in the middle of the day where she's like not expecting it, she's with her friends, she's totally like, caught off guard. So that initial connection with that dude usually lands a lot easier and better if you have the right script and obviously the right like kind of like energy around you. Podcasting is like that with our customers. So with podcasting, people aren't most of the time, if you have a great show, they're not going to hear a pitch, at least in one that doesn't seem too salesy. So they're not in that like, oh, I've got to keep my guard up there. They're more in a mind frame of like, I clicked on this episode because I want to learn more behind what they said in the title. So the intent is different. And also their awareness is different, right? They're not going to see an ad because they're on a podcast. Right. So they're not going to be worried about that. Also, their focus is different, right? So if you're speaking to someone in their ear, you can't listen to two different things at the same time and get anything out of them. We can have a lot of tabs open and we can have a lot of stuff we're scrolling through. So I think it's focus, it's attention, and the fact that like your customers, I know for sure I will listen to a podcast longer than I will listen to a webinar. That's like
so true.
What I mean? True. Like webinar, you're expecting to get pitch, you're expecting to get a lot of like the social proof and whatnot. So for podcasting, I think it's what I've seen and experienced is that people are just more open and they're there to learn. Like they clicked on the link for a reason. If you throw your ad in front of someone's face on Instagram, they probably didn't ask for it. They didn't, what I mean? So, so it's a whole different mindset and frame as to why that person's there, which allows you to go deep and build trust with them. Stats have shown we know for a fact that podcast listeners are more fluent, they're more educated, they typically have a college education. So for us, like there's better chance you're going to find those kind of listeners on, or those kind of customers on a podcasting medium, as opposed to like Instagram. Like they're still there. Their intent's totally different.
Yeah. Different follow-up. And like, maybe you can correct or confirm this. I've heard that the average household income of a podcast listener is 75,000 or more. I
believe that's true. I have to check the stats. It changes every year, but last time I checked, it's around there.
It was like the Nielsen report, or I forget what source that I was looking, but I kept pumping into that. I was like, what? I mean, punchline lesson, like sell to an audience that that have money. And I would also say, not that it's just fully socioeconomic status. It's also just like the right fit. Right. Mm-hmm. So if we're selling, a service-based, business to other businesses, the stage, we all know the stage of building, right? And so where do those people live? I was like, oh, a lot of them live on podcasts. That's where they're listening. So I was really blown away by that personally. And the more I dive into podcasts, I'm like, well, shoot, like, what do I do? Like, I download, I listen to podcasts. It's just funny to like flip the script and think about what you actually do as a person, how you show up. So those are great stats. Learning more about podcast listeners. I loved your analogy of like, it's the environment. It's a lot different environment. So like if a great, warm, a little bit more friendly environment, guard's not up as much. There is some pursuit. Hey, there's some interest. I'm saying, yes, I'm coming close to you, swimming towards you, so to speak, for some reason, right?
Yeah, exactly.
What is it like? How do you continue to build? Obviously, just listening, you have a clear call to action, so there's less like peripheral follow-up. Let's talk about email campaigns. Let's talk about other systems that are around podcasts. What do you use and why?
So when it comes to podcasts, so I think of it like this: the podcast, the content we create on a podcast, we are also going to integrate into our welcome series for like our new emails. So whether they come in through Facebook or paid ads or whatever, we want to get the podcast in front of their face. So one of the things we like to do and like to encourage our clients to do is like, hey, take your podcast content, like the best stuff, use it in your welcome series, because that's free content that they're going to consume. They're also going to know your voice. They're going to hear your like mannerisms. They're going to start to build a silent relationship with you. And that's hugely important, because now they can put a voice into your emails. So when they're reading your emails, they're reading it in your voice, which is going to allow them to build that deeper trust with you. So when it comes to like the email sequences, you want to use that podcast content in there, especially in that welcome series, right? Yeah. We've also found it helpful. Like if you take one smart thing to do is like, if you get a bunch of sales objections, let's just say, for example, like, you get these same 3 objections on your sales calls every single time. Yeah. You want to make podcast episodes on those sales objections. And then when someone's booking an appointment in your calendar, you can say, hey, check out these check out these 3 episodes. on my podcast. It'll really help you get to know us and what we're about and like how we help people, how we help our customers. So you can integrate the podcast into different parts of your sales process, or different parts of your business as well. So the objections is one piece, indoctrination is another piece. Like you can have episodes dedicated to those things. And then also in the follow-up process, we use email, obviously, like, especially, I know some people will bring on guests who are their potential clients, right? Or like people they'd like to work with, right? Maybe not, they're not trying to sell them on the episode, but even having, I was talking to a guy today about like, he wants to launch a podcast for local businesses because he to a lot of local businesses, but he helps them with. So someone like that, you want to build a private email list with all of your guests, and then follow up with them using like a weekly newsletter or something, just to keep keep in contact with them, because most people are not going to buy from you right off the episode, but they will keep you in mind when they have that problem come up 3, 6, 9, 12 months down the road. And that's for me personally, like I've seen the best ROI is like in that 3 to 6 month range of people when they come on the show, or they'll listen to the show and be guests. And then a couple months later, when their problem hits up, then they hit me up because I've been talking to them obviously for the last 3 months on my podcast, or 6 months. So, I don't know if that hit your question, Chris, but let me know. We can totally dive in more.
Well, here's what I'm hearing. Yeah, I feel like it did. The things that I'm hearing are peripheral systems around launching your podcast. You shared time frames. You shared content creation methods in terms of acquiring, overcoming objections, in terms of indoctrinating, essentially. So I think those are all like, really good ways to speak to customers, future customers, and managing an audience, managing the relationships that you're building. And then the last piece you started to get into, which I know we've talked about a little bit, before today, is the people that are coming towards you and responding. And it might be 3 months, might be 6 months, somewhere in there. I know you mentioned you had some slides that were speaking to some of this, like, what they're saying, where they're coming from. I think I thought it was really powerful because it speaks to some of the results that are being created, is like what people can expect or should expect from the time that they're investing into a podcast. Man, if I'm assuming I'm not alone, like, because we have launched a podcast, like even if it's a repurposing move and the publishing and the keyword and it's just it's a whole thing, man. So I just want to pull this up real quick so you can kind of talk through what people should be expecting in terms of fruit from the time they're investing.
Right. It's a great question. So what I found is that people will listen, like your average customer, if someone's going to be interested in working with you after listening to your podcast, they're going to listen, and they're typically going to listen for two things. Number one, they're going to listen for, can I disqualify this person? Like they're going to be looking for a reason to disqualify you. And then they're also going to be looking for reasons to jump on and say now. Until they will find one of those two things, they will continue to listen until they either dismiss you or you push them over the edge. And like the screenshots that you'll see here, these are just people who have reached out to me. And for full transparency, like I have a small audience. Like I've got my podcast gets around 1,000 to 1,500 downloads a month. So it's a small audience, but I'm speaking directly to people who want to grow or build podcasts. So I don't need a huge audience to scale this or to make my money off of it.
I think that's a really good punchline right there for people.
Yeah.
Hey,
totally.
You don't need tens or even hundreds of thousands, millions of downloads to win, so to speak, right? Or Facebook group size. Like you don't, it's great. 1,000, 2,000, 5, 10 plus, whatever. Like it's good. But if you know who you're talking to, you know what service and offering you're bringing to market, and you know why it's quality and who it's quality for, man, it's not always quantity. Obviously things can grow and scale, but I thought that was a really good punchline.
Yeah. Oh, totally. It is. Cause I know, there's guys I know who have a smaller following, but they're getting tons of like what happens is usually it's interesting too. So you can have like, for me, I have a system that takes people from the podcast to my email list or to booking a call. And that's what you'll see here. If like people have just emailed me or they've reached out and say like, how did you hear about me? Like, oh, I've been listening to your podcast for 3 months. But another really strong tactic we've seen And Chris, I know, are you familiar with the phrase two steps, like two-step posts?
Walk me through it.
Okay, so it's like basically you put out a post that, hey, I just created this amazing free checklist, shows you how to get your first 100,000 downloads. Comment below if you want it. So people like comment below, you hit them up in a DM, and then you kind of start a conversation that's like around their big problem.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
So some people we've seen had a lot of success with like a similar method, but on podcasting. And I haven't come up with a name with it or anything. But basically they will talk about a free checklist or resource or something that they mentioned that was valuable on the show. We can call it a script or sales script, maybe. People who hear that message, they will often go and hit you up in DM on Facebook, or they find you on Instagram and say, hey man, like I listened to episode 16 about that script. And you said if I DM'd you, I could have it. So just want to see if I can get it. So there's a way to create, like, even if you don't need a big audience for this, again, there's a way to create that inbound traffic through the podcast by doing something like a two-step where you're mentioning a free resource or a checklist or a way to help people. And then they'll naturally go and just go and source you out and say, okay, I got to hit them up.
There we go.
So yeah, like it's not going to come in droves, but it's going to trickle in, and those are easy. Those are normally easy sales, or normally people who are really hot that you could probably figure out a way to help in some way or another.
Yeah. I mean, you're starting the conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
And filling the pipeline. I love it, man. I love it. Let's we gotta cover a little bit on podcast. Just like some of the fears, some of the pitfalls.
Yeah.
Some of the, if you do this, you're gonna hate life and podcasts. Type stuff. You know what I mean?
Totally. So I think some people see a podcast as only an interview show, or only a like a solo show, right? So I think one thing I've seen people really hate after a while is if they try and stick to only doing interviews, or they're only doing solo 10-minute episodes. Like, that's great, and you should stick to that most of the time. But if you make it so like strict on yourself that you can't go out of that box, you're probably going to end up quitting. So having some flexibility within your show, whether it's like, hey, we think smart and say, hey, we're just going to do it in seasons. So this season will all be about copywriting, and then this season will be about interviewing experts, and then this season is about something else. That's a really smart way to give yourself longevity and variability without like confusing the crap out of people, because then they don't know where you're going. So I think being a little too rigid in your process is one thing. A second thing I've seen people shoot themselves in the foot in is when they try to go way too broad with their messaging. And I'm sure you've seen this as well, Chris, in marketing, and it's like how people are positioning themselves. And my biggest tip is, like, if you go narrow and then you start talking about one thing really, really well, people will naturally grow with you, and then you'll be able to talk about more things later on. But if you start off too broad, people won't really know why they're there or what you're supposed to be delivering. So go narrow and then let the audience grow with you.
Can we talk about that for a second?
Yeah, sure.
So like going narrow, and my big where I'm going with this is simply how do you grow with your podcast audience? Meaning, where are you getting the feedback? Are we just looking in the comment section? Are they just reaching out and you listen to the people reach? Like, what methodologies do you recommend on keeping a pulse on your growing audience?
It's a great question. So feedback loops, there's a couple. Number one is, if you already have a Facebook group, like we send a lot of our traffic there in certain episodes, which will allow us to pull in information about like what kind of content we're creating and what they like. We also poll Facebook groups. So even if the podcast is like one thing and you've got a Facebook group over here, we'll poll them and say, hey, like, what kind of content on our podcast should we create? And then they'll just give us the answers. So those are two things, like sending people to your Facebook group or just polling an existing Facebook group that has your ideal customers. The actual listeners, another way to do it, Chris, is by saying, hey, like, we're going to be shouting out and giving spotlight to one review every single week. So there's a podcast called Marketing School that did this really well. They did one review per episode. And what people happened is people wanted to actually hear their name in their review, and they did it whether it was 1 star or 5 stars, which is really cool, because you get to hear some of the bad reviews.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's super transparent. I love it. And so people started to give them more reviews and feedback when they heard that they were going to listen. So letting people know, like, hey, I'm going to be reading off one review every single week, whether it's good, bad, or otherwise, about this podcast. So those are a couple of ways.
I love that tip right there. That's a good one.
Yeah, it's a fun one when you get the 1 stars. Somebody else, it's funny. I saw this person in a Facebook group. They took all their podcast reviews and made shirts out of them, and they made like a 1-star review, a shirt with a 1-star review of their podcast on it, and they sold it.
I love that idea. Here's why you should listen to us. 1-star review, and
exactly.
I wonder if it worked or how well it sold. But
I'm curious as well. But you can get creative with that stuff. So
I love the direction we're going, and with like podcast, like just some of the challenges, some of the good ideas to build connection, engagement. I'm terrified to ask you my next question.
Yeah.
Because it can result more on my plate. But like just you made another correlation, like peripheral systems, Facebook groups and podcasts. Mm-hmm. Facebook group for engagement. You send people there and you're listening for feedback there. I know a lot of listeners right now have Facebook groups or have at least thought or considered it. The ones like myself and others that do, we're talking right now in just a member spotlight, right? In a Facebook group and a couple other locations. We're also providing 10-minute tune-up, sales tune-ups in our group, our inner circle group here.
Yeah.
So if like this is the ultimate question, if we were to take this same content and it were to live in a podcast, how does that affect our business? Is it worth the extra time? And I love asking a podcast guy this, right?
It's a great question. So it's funny because I have clients who actually have done this. Like they've come to us and said, hey, my Facebook group's doing great. We're making about 50K a month, 60K a month. And we want to take that content and we want to put it on the podcast. Now, will it affect your business indirectly? Like right now, like the next 3 months? Probably not. Maybe you'll get 1 or 2 sales extra. The reason why people do that stuff is because they usually have a greater vision of speaking on stages, getting asked to present at masterminds, and kind of building a bigger brand that requires that. Because you could do what you're doing here, and this is basically podcasting. Like it's just podcasting with video, which is even better. Yeah. So for me, like I see it as it's for people who kind of see themselves and their brand as a bigger. It's going to go bigger, right? They want to have the ability to speak on stages. They want to have the engagements and speaking engagements. They want to be the consultants. Like, so if you're going in that direction and kind of going more, I guess, I don't know, I dare say mainstream, that's where I see a lot of people. Cause like, I know plenty of people who don't have a podcast and they do 3, 4, 5 mil a year and they have zero intentions of starting one. And that's okay. Yeah. So that, it just depends on like where you see yourself and your brand going. And also another thing too, if you want a book deal, like for some reason now, I think I've seen a lot of people spring up podcasts because they want a book deal and they want to get recognized by an author or by a publishing house. And they want to get that advancement. Not saying it's going to happen, but from what
it's a strategy.
Exactly. It's a track sheet. It's another piece to the puzzle of if you want to go that route. So I hope that answers your question, man.
Love it, man. No, it makes sense. I was scared because I'm like, oh shoot, am I going to have to turn this into a podcast? Because you just sold me on it. It's more, and I feel like you answered it, really valuably, really well. You're saying, hey, if your intentions, like you have kind of a big message that fits on stages, that fits on, and that's part of your strategy and business model. Yeah. Then this can be a really leveraged platform for you that you'd recommend. Man, and as we're kind of getting towards the end of our conversation here, one big topic we have not dove into is with podcasts is video podcast.
Yeah.
Do you go just the podcast audio route, or do you go video podcast route, and why?
A video podcast route all day. Like what you guys are doing here is gold, because this can be turned into a podcast that works perfectly on an audio platform. It can also be turned into mini clips that you can then use to scale across your social media accounts, is of course, and repurpose. So if you're super shy on camera, or if you're like I was when I started out, then you could do video first and then kind of get your feet wet and then go into or audio first and then do video. So those routes are always open, but I'd say video all day. With all the live streaming capabilities, like you were mentioning before, like this is going live on 5 places. Like, why wouldn't you do video? Especially if you're serious about like putting the message out there and being super, super successful with this. I think video is the way to go for sure.
Right on, right on. So yeah, if you're setting up the time, go for it. Okay, well that's helpful because we're going that direction. So
Yeah.
I've been hearing that, like, man, that's like such a great piece of content to create because you can use it in so many different ways. And
Yeah.
awesome, man. Hey, before we kind of get to the last question or so, where's the best place to find you?
Probably here on Facebook. I'm in this Facebook group, so that's probably the best place. And then obviously my personal profile has a bunch of links and content about podcasting. And then we've got the Facebook group, which, yeah, if you go to my Facebook page, you'll find the Facebook group by default because it's like everywhere. So here on Facebook is probably the best place.
Perfect.
Or just, podcastdomination.co is the website if that's easier. But yeah. Yeah.
Right on, man. And I'll give you a shameless plug here on just the free challenge that launched today, actually.
It did.
And it's a free challenge. And so anytime we do these member spotlights, it's always about value. It's always about giving free challenge to learn. Obviously all of us business owners, it's like, you offer some great programs and things, but the free 5-day challenge, if you're somewhat interested in podcasting, really excited about podcasting, terrified of it, never want to do it, but you're like, I just want to know, or like spend more time on it. This would be a great challenge because I know the results that you've created. I know that you know how you go about creating content. So I feel comfortable saying, hey, go check out Lewis's 5-day challenge around podcasting. What's the actual title of it?
The Launch to Profit Challenge.
Launch to Profit Challenge. Yeah. Perfect, man. That's what we're all trying to do, right?
Exactly. That's
so, I think I'm really excited to hear some of the results that come from Launch to Profit Challenge that you're launching, man. So that's great. Last question I always like to ask everyone is, it's fun to talk business. It's fun to talk strategy and mastermind a little bit, and even get some of the comments that you guys have been sharing. I always like to end with a little bit more of the why. Like what drives people, just more of the connection piece. Cause it's like, we all get it. Like building a business it's challenging, and there's ups and downs. There's team, there's no team. You're putting yourself out there. There's a lot of reject. Why do we put ourselves through all this stuff? And so for you, man, like what is your why? What is the impact that you're really trying to create in the world?
Yeah, I'll give you 2. So one, I remember seeing my parents work themselves into the ground, and I never wanted to be like that. And I always wanted to support my mom, my dad. So for me, I came into this, I was like, I actually hated the word entrepreneur for the first 2 years I was an entrepreneur. Like I hated it. I did not want to be
Why is that?
I think it was an identity thing. There's a really big identity thing. I was like, I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm just a guy out here trying to hustle and make it. That's it. And try to support my mom and dad, because they were entrepreneurs too, but they just went about business a whole different way. And they still work super hard to this day. So that was one thing. The second thing is because I've personally had my life changed by podcasts, like completely changed my trajectory in life. Absolutely 100%. So I know the power it can bring to somebody. So, I've had people like clients like cry because of the results. Because like the clients or the people that they've impacted because of the podcasts. So that's for me, like I personally have been influenced by it. So it's like, why wouldn't I want to give that to the 18-year-old me who's lost as heck like I was and is looking for a way to live a life that they know they want to live. So those are my two big ones.
Dude, thank you for sharing that. It's so interesting to me how it seems like in our journeys, you're an artist, you're a musician, you're an athlete, you're an entrepreneur, you're a business owner, etc. There's some epiphany moment of like some feeling, positive feeling we typically have. And usually the good ones anyway boil down to, man, it's just this. And I just want to, I actually just want to give that to more people.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not copy. It's not words. You know what I'm saying? It's like, no, it's like just this simple. And like, if you're about it, let's do it, you know? So anyway, I know you're a sales center, man. Like you're one of us. We're really grateful for you being in the group, really grateful for you taking time to share with more people and anyone listening for the member spotlight. Part of the main premise of this group is just this. It is connection. It's a big belief of mine. A phrase that has served me really well is if you want to accomplish something greater than yourself, it takes more than yourself. And so reaching out and connecting with other people, networking is something that has changed my life. And man, I'm so grateful to get to do it with you today. So that said, man, thanks for hanging out here, and everyone else, Sales Centers, we'll see you on the next one.